That ringing you hear when you turn off the light doesn't come from your ear, it comes from your brain. What happens is that when the auditory cells stop sending signals, the brain doesn't accept silence. It turns up its own internal volume to compensate, and the more silence you seek, the louder it gets. There is a sequence of 5 steps that, applied in the 30 minutes before bedtime, can begin to change that. And there is a specific mistake that almost everyone makes right at the moment they're trying to sleep, which makes the tinnitus worse without you even realizing it. I'll get to that. But before that, I need to show you what is happening inside your nervous system. Because until you understand the real origin of that noise, anything you try will feel like shooting in the dark. My name is Thomas Ellsworth. Here at Senior Health, we talk about health honestly, based on what science actually says. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now. Tinnitus has a clinical name, and for a long time, medicine treated it as an ear problem. It looked for solutions in the ear canal, in the hair cells, in the cochlea. The results were, most of the time, very limited, and there is a clear reason for that. The problem was not where everyone was looking. Imagine a microphone connected to a speaker. While the microphone captures sounds from the environment, the speaker plays them back at a normal volume. Now imagine that microphone stops working. The speaker doesn't turn off. It turns up its internal volume, trying to pick up some signal, and it starts amplifying even its own electrical noise. That is exactly what happens in your brain. When the hair cells of the inner ear are damaged, whether by loud noise, aging, certain medications, or infections, they stop sending electrical signals to the auditory cortex. And the brain, which was not programmed to accept absolute silence, turns up its own gain. It creates a sound where there is none. Neuroscientists call this maladaptive neuroplasticity. The brain trying to adapt, just in the wrong way. It's the same mechanism behind phantom pain, that real and painful sensation amputees feel in a limb that no longer exists. The nervous system creates a concrete experience from something that is no longer there. That changes everything. If tinnitus lives in the brain, treating only the ear is like trying to fix a short circuit by changing the outlet. Have you ever tried to cover your ears to escape the ringing and noticed it actually got louder? Now you know why. And here is what I need you to take seriously. Ignoring tinnitus is not harmless. Not because it will directly damage your hearing, but because of what it does to your nervous system over time. The constant ringing activates the amygdala, the brain structure responsible for processing threats. When the amygdala identifies the tinnitus as a danger signal, it triggers alert mode. It releases cortisol. It keeps the body in a state of readiness. This doesn't happen once, it happens every night. Every time you lie down, the environment goes quiet and the ringing appears. The brain goes into war mode. Doreen was 68 years old when she first told me about her tinnitus. She didn't describe it as pain. She described it as a gentle torture. What bothered her most wasn't the noise itself, it was the anticipation. She would start feeling anxious in the late afternoon before she even got close to her bed. Her body already knew what was coming when the light went out. That cycle, tinnitus triggering stress, stress amplifying the perception of tinnitus, is one of the hardest patterns to break because it feeds on itself. And the instinctive response most people try, seeking absolute silence to fall asleep, is exactly what keeps that cycle going. There is a very specific physiological explanation for this, and it is at the heart of the protocol I'm about to show you. Absolute silence is, in fact, the worst possible environment for a brain with tinnitus. When there is no external sound, the auditory cortex enters a state of hypervigilance. It sharpens its sensitivity to pick up any available signal. And what it finds, instead of the environment, is its own amplified internal noise. It's like pointing a spotlight directly at the ringing. The solution is not silence. It's the opposite of that, and I'll explain why. But before I get to the full protocol, I need to show you what is happening at the chemical level inside your ear. Because there are two specific processes that, when left uncontrolled, keep tinnitus at a level that no environmental adjustment will resolve on its own. The first is called glutamate excitotoxicity. Glutamate is a neurotransmitter, essential for communication between the nerve cells of the inner ear. The problem is that in situations of stress or injury, it is released in excess, and in high amounts, it literally burns the auditory nerves, like leaving an engine running at full speed until it overheats. Magnesium acts as the gatekeeper in this process. It blocks the receptors that glutamate uses to flood the cells. When there is a magnesium deficiency, that protection disappears. The door stays open. A study published in the International Tinnitus Journal followed patients with magnesium deficiency over 3 months of supplementation. The result was a significant reduction in the perception of tinnitus. The intensity dropped measurably in most participants. The second process involves vitamin B12. The auditory nerves, like all nerves in the body, are protected by a layer called the myelin sheath. It works like the rubber coating around an electrical wire. When that coating is intact, the signal travels the path without interference. When it deteriorates due to B12 deficiency, the signal leaks, and that leakage is perceived as noise. A study from the American Journal of Otolaryngology, conducted with 113 military personnel, found that 47% of those with tinnitus had a vitamin B12 deficiency, nearly half. That is not a coincidence. Have you ever had your B12 levels checked? It's worth having that conversation with your doctor. Now let's get to the protocol. 5 pillars, applied in the 30-minute window before bedtime. The first is nutrition. What you eat in the hours before sleep directly affects the chemistry of your inner ear. Pumpkin seeds, spinach, and avocado are dense sources of magnesium and potassium. These minerals work together to stabilize the electrical activity of the auditory nerves. You don't need to eat all 3 at once. A small portion of any one of them already helps. For those considering supplementation, the most effective forms of magnesium for this purpose are magnesium threonate and bisglycinate. They are better absorbed and cross the blood-brain barrier more easily, reaching the central nervous system more effectively, but always with medical guidance before starting any supplement. The second pillar is nighttime hydration. And here is a warning that goes against the habits of many people. Having a glass of wine to relax before bed seems harmless, but alcohol destabilizes the endolymph, the fluid that fills the inner ear and regulates acoustic pressure. When that fluid is disrupted, the internal pressure increases and can intensify the ringing considerably. The same goes for excess sodium at night. Salt retains fluid, and that retention inside the inner ear creates a pressurization that some specialists describe as a silent hydraulic storm. The recommendation is to stop fluid intake 2 hours before going to bed, and to avoid high-sodium foods at dinner. Clifford was 72 years old and had spent decades as a driver. He came to me with tinnitus that varied in intensity throughout the day, sometimes barely noticeable, sometimes unbearable. What he didn't know was that his dinner, always heavy in cured meats and aged cheeses, was directly contributing to the pressurization of his inner ear. When we adjusted his nighttime hydration and eating habits, the variation decreased noticeably within the first few weeks. The third pillar is physical, and this is the one that surprises people the most. There is a muscle on the side of the neck that, when chronically tense, can simulate or amplify tinnitus. and most people have never heard of it. It's called the sternocleidomastoid. It's the muscle that runs along the side of the neck, from the bone behind the ear down to the collarbone. When it is chronically tense, whether from poor posture, accumulated stress, or decades of repetitive movement, it can compress nerves and vessels near the inner ear, generating or amplifying tinnitus. This type is called somatosensory tinnitus, and it responds very well to a simple technique. With 2 fingers, gently press the base of the muscle near the collarbone. Make slow movements from bottom to top along the entire length of the muscle for 2 to 3 minutes on each side, without excessive pressure. The goal is to release accumulated tension, not to massage with force. For a specific group of people, this simple gesture before bed reduces the intensity of the ringing noticeably. The 4th pillar is environment, and here is the mistake I mentioned at the very beginning. Absolute silence puts the brain in active search mode. It scans the environment looking for sounds, and finding nothing, it amplifies the internal signal. It is exactly the opposite of what you need. The solution is sound therapy. Specifically, the use of brown or pink noise, low-frequency sounds like steady rain, a distant waterfall, or a gentle wind. The volume should be set just slightly below the intensity of your tinnitus, not to cover the ringing, but to give the brain a real external stimulus to process. A study from Michigan State University documented that low-frequency sounds reduce the activity of the cerebral amygdala, that same alert structure that tinnitus keeps activated. When the amygdala slows down, the stress cycle begins to unravel, and the brain gradually reclassifies the ringing as something that poses no threat. This is the process specialists call habituation. It doesn't happen in one night, but it does happen. Turning off screens at least 1 hour before bed is also part of this pillar. The blue light emitted by phones and tablets blocks melatonin production. And melatonin is not just the sleep hormone. It has a direct restorative function in the inner ear, acting as an antioxidant in the auditory cells. When you spend the last moments of your day scrolling, you are blocking the cleaning truck before it even leaves the garage. The 5th pillar is regeneration. 2 controlled studies, one from Ohio State University and another from Washington University in St. Louis, investigated the use of 3 milligrams of melatonin in patients with tinnitus. The results showed a reduction in tinnitus intensity and an objective improvement in the discomfort score reported by participants, not as a side effect, as a direct cellular repair mechanism in the inner ear. Sleep position also matters more than it seems. Elevating the head by approximately 15 degrees improves venous return and reduces pressure inside the inner ear during the night. A small difference in pillow height can make a real difference in how you wake up. Before I close, I need to mention 2 signs that require immediate medical attention. If your tinnitus is pulsatile, meaning it pulses in sync with your heartbeat, this may indicate a vascular cause. It is not the common pattern of tinnitus. It needs to be investigated urgently. In the same way, if the ringing appeared suddenly in only one ear, accompanied by dizziness or sudden hearing loss, seek medical attention without delay. These signs may indicate conditions that require a quick diagnosis. The protocol you saw here works for the most common form of tinnitus, the neurological and sensory type. For less common forms, the path is different, and the doctor is the mandatory starting point. Take care of your sleep. Take care of your nervous system. Not because tinnitus will disappear overnight, but because the body has a real capacity to reorganize itself when you stop fighting it and start working with it. Have you ever tried sound therapy to sleep with tinnitus? Which of these pillars is already part of your routine? Tell me in the comments. Real experiences from people going through this reach far more people than any study ever could. If this content was helpful to you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell.